I want to welcome you guys to this breakout session on the future of agriculture at the annual conference. My name is Bill Kyger. I'll be the moderator, and I'm from Rockingham County, and it's kind of appropriate, I guess, for somebody from Rockingham County to be moderating something on agriculture. Rockingham County, for those of you who don't know it, is the leading agri-producing county in the Commonwealth of Virginia by a pretty sizable amount. We were just talking about dairy farms, and we just dropped under 200 dairy farms in Rockingham County, and I think if you total up the total dairies in Virginia statewide, you don't come to 200. Other than, Rockingham County has as many dairies as are the rest of the state, I think, or close to it. But anyway, we have with us two speakers that are going to present about 15-20 minutes of information, and then they will be available for questions from you guys to talk about. We have the Honorable Bettina, who's Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry for the Commonwealth of Virginia, who I had the pleasure of serving on the Virginia Fire Services Board with for a short period of time. And we have Ms. Susan Sink, who's the owner and operator of Sinkland Farms. Agriculture, of course, remains the largest private sector business entity in Virginia. It employs over 300,000 people and contributes billions of dollars to the state economy. It is, I think, also the largest exporting sector of Virginia's economy, and Virginia is one of the leading exporting states in the Union. It's hard to really overstate the importance and significance of agriculture in our economic sector, as every Virginian, whether they realize it or not, is highly invested in the long-term success of an ag economy. I mean, we have to eat, and we have to hopefully drink lots of milk, more milk than what we're drinking. And even if you don't drink milk, you probably drink beer. And if you drink beer in Virginia, I hope you're drinking one of our craft beers. Or if you're not drinking one of our craft beers, at least drink an Anheuser-Busch or a Coors Miller product, because they are also produced in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we have lots of It's also true that farming in America has undergone a continuous and at times quite dramatic transformation since its beginnings 4 centuries ago. Again, starting in Virginia. Spurred by technological advancement and new methods of growing, producing, and processing our food, fiber, timber, and even fuel, farming in Virginia has changed and continues to change and evolve. These changes can be witnessed in the number of Virginians engaged in farming, the number of farms, and even in how we define farming. We have to continually redefine farming, and that's kind of hard for those who are from the old school that think that farming is planting a seed in the ground, watching something grow up, and that happens. And in a county that has big poultry productions, one could argue that a poultry producer is one that has turkeys out in the field, but we've seen the evolution of the turkey industry back in the 20s and 30s from the Wampler family go into a highly industrialized product and almost a factory where they go in one end of the building this big and they come out the other end of the building this big to go on your Thanksgiving and Christmas tables, and I hope other days of the year as well. So we've seen this transformation in agriculture and this evolution in agriculture that really is astonishing. And it's an understatement to say that America feeds the world, because we do. And we feed the world because of our advancements in technology and science and understanding of agriculture and our ability to produce more with less. And so I'm proud to say that Virginia is also one of the leading ag-producing states in the nation. So that makes agriculture a pretty big piece. Again, I would like to say that agriculture is the 800-pound gorilla of Virginia's economy. And I know that some people in Virginia would like to think that other things may be, but the agricultural sector started as the cane, with tobacco and cotton years ago, 400 years ago in Jamestown and around that area, to what we have today, and it's still king. And we have to remember that. And we're doing more on less land with fewer farmers than ever before. So, having said all of that, I think we will begin with the Secretary of Agriculture, and if you will just take about 20 minutes to tell us your viewpoints on agriculture. And if you would give them both a round of applause in advance.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. It's nice to look in the audience and to see some old friends, a number of folks. It's really nice to see folks that are really steeped in agriculture and forestry also serving on the Board of Supervisors. So Ann Malik from Albemarle County. I live in Albemarle. She was one of the first landowners I worked with when I was a young forester in the field working for the Department of Forestry. See Susan Seward, Chair of the Board of Supervisors in Sussex County, and also her family being in the lumber business and working for Virginia Forest Products Association. And Thomas Edlund from New Kent, and just knowing what is happening there, and also your business, your family being in business for a very long time in the forest products industry. And so I think that my remarks today, and certainly as we get into Q&A, I think the role that you all play is just instrumental. It's critical to making sure that we continue to have the robust ag and forestry industry that we have across the Commonwealth. I'm going to hit my start button here because I don't want to take Susan's time. I'm really anxious to hear more about her farm, and I know you are as well. And so I'm going to watch my time and try to keep my remarks to 20 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. But I truly believe that the partnership we have between the state and local level is just truly important. It's unique, and it's something that we value. And this morning you heard from Governor Northam. I hate that I couldn't be here for his remarks, but was in Floyd County for another work event and returning from there. But for those of you that are in rural communities, I'm just like a show of hands for those of you in the audience that are from rural communities. Quickly. Great. And any urban, more urbanizing counties? Albemarle certainly been in transition in half and half, but I'll talk a little bit about urban agriculture as well. But certainly we're fortunate to have, as mentioned, the #1 industry with agriculture, and then with forestry being number 3. Those two combine $91 billion, over 450,000 jobs each year. And so that's something we're very proud of, and we're very fortunate also to have this cabinet position to be able to make sure that we remind folks that we're advising the governor to be able to move forward in ensuring that ag and forestry is at the table and that we're making informed decisions. So as you look across the Commonwealth, I think we're pretty fortunate. I grew up in a rural area, and I'll talk a little more about that, but we're also fortunate to have a team, our entire team, the secretariats from rural communities. Brad Copenhager, who used to work with Katie Frazier, Bill's daughter, at the Virginia Agribusiness Council, is our deputy. He comes from Washington County and graduated from the College of Agriculture at Virginia Tech. And then we also have Heidi Hertz from Lunenburg County, grew up as tobacco farming in her family, as well as Brad, and then Brad's from a cattle farm. And so Heidi studied food and nutrition within the College of Ag at Virginia Tech, and then Brandon Hatcher, our executive assistant, grew up on a cattle farm in Buckingham County. So we don't forget the rural communities in our secretariat, and we're very blessed to have a great ag commissioner with Dr. Jewel Bernal, grew up in the Petersburg area, and then Rob Farrell, our current state forester, who used to be our deputy state forester, and David Lermont with the Racing Commission. So those are the 3 agencies within our secretariat. So today I was asked to talk about our priorities a little bit, and knowing that rural economic development is really important to the governor. It's important to all of us. For me, growing up in Craig County, fell in love with trees at a very young age in forestry, and feel fortunate to have spent my career in forestry and land conservation. I've been passionate about agriculture, and to be able to now promote those wonderful products that we have. As Bill mentioned, I keep finding out these layers of this gentleman here. We used to serve on the fire service board together. I didn't realize at the time he was Katie Frazier's father, even though I was working quite a bit with Katie, and then started hearing more about her father and his role in sort of government and teaching in the public school system. and then knowing that their ag connection, and then being on the board of supervisors. Just new layers, except today I learned that he was a big UVA fan. Somehow I missed that until I saw his tie. But anyway, those ties and those connections we all have are deep, and I think that we need to continue to make sure that we're maintaining those relationships and that we're getting to know all of the layers of each other and how we can support each other and the great agriculture industry we have here in the state. So what I want to do, I was asked to speak to our priorities and about some of the innovation going on in the state as it relates to agriculture. I could spend 45 minutes, an hour up here talking about all the great innovation because it's truly amazing with the wonderful universities that we have, the great technologies from the private sector, and from all of us working together. There's just so much going on. And I'll just highlight some of those as I kind of lay out our priorities and some things that I see happening in the state. When you think about the fact that we have so much history, it's been 400 years. Ag was our first industry here in the state, and forestry, and that's something we're very proud of. And we continue to innovate and continue to make sure that we're number one. And if you look at across the state, about 32% of our state is farmland, and about 2/3 of that is forest land. And that's something that we take seriously, and we want to make sure that we're able to retain that forest land and farmland in the state. We realize that it's more than just about economic development, that these forests and these farms actually provide many benefits to us, to our well-being, really integral to our health across the board, and certainly, as mentioned, we feed the world and we make sure that we're providing fiber for the world, and so that's truly important, and we play an important role in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Over the next 3 years, and the clock is ticking, I feel a real sense of urgency now in this position, a little different than when I was serving as state forester. We have a lot to get done, but I think by working together, we can make those things happen. So I just want to touch on our 4 priorities. Rural economic development, certainly you heard that from the governor this morning. We're going to continue to grow existing businesses and look at new investments, and we're going to continue to expand exports because we have a really important role to play there. We're going to continue to enhance farm and forest land retention and to look at various ways we can make sure that happens in the state. We're going to be supporting the gaming industry. We're bringing back Colonial Downs in New Kent. That's really important to that county and to the surrounding community and to the Commonwealth. But we're going to do that in a responsible way. And we're going to combat food insecurity, which we have across the state, and sometimes it's easy to forget about that. We're going to make sure that children and families have food, have access to healthy food, healthy, nutritious food. So let me talk a little bit about rural economic development and what we're doing within our secretariat. And one program that I'm very proud of is our APHID program. How many of you in here have heard of the APHID program? Great. Hopefully you've taken advantage of that. So it's our Agriculture, Forestry, Industrial Development program, and it allows us to work hand in hand with local government to support businesses either establishing new businesses or expanding existing businesses in the ag and forestry world. And this was established because some were falling through the cracks. Route 11 chips is actually how this got started, because they were not really qualifying for some of the other incentives that we had out there. And so fortunately, we were able to put this program in place. And since the inception of it in 2012, over 70 projects have been awarded in rural communities across the state. And so I'm going to highlight just a few of those because it speaks to the innovation of these family businesses, these companies across the state, and also local government, and how you're approaching things to make sure we can continue to support them. So one that I'm very excited about is Speyside Cooperage, which we recently announced in Washington and Smith counties. We're going to have a stave mill, a new stave mill, and the first cooperage, bourbon cooperage business here in the state. I mean, if you go way back in our history, we had that, but we haven't had that in a long time. So that's truly exciting. It's going to create about 160 jobs in that area in Southwest Virginia where we desperately need jobs. And we already down the road in Millboro, in Bath County, Speyside has opened a stave mill, and they're going strong. They already have 50 employees in place. I think they'd originally looked at 35 employees. They're hoping to double that before long. And so these really do not only provide jobs for the community, they have to source materials locally. So any APHID recipient has to source 30% from the local area. And so they're providing a market for white oak here in this area and also in Southwest Virginia. And that allows us to be able to restore the forest, to be able to provide better wildlife habitat, to make sure we're managing our forests in a healthy and sustainable manner. One project that I'm very proud of is in Dinwiddie County, and it's a dairy farm. And as mentioned, Bill, we are using the small dairy farms that we have across the state, In this particular dairy, Richland Dairy, fifth generation farmers, the daughter went to college, she came back home to help the family think about changing their business model. So they turned their business model upside down. She's establishing a creamery next door to that in Dinwiddie County. And it was so rewarding to be there at that event, to be able to see her grandparents, and her grandfather actually just recently passed away. But to see them sitting in a golf cart, because that's how they were getting around the farm at the time, and to see her one-year-old daughter on her husband's lap on the front row at that event, and to have Senator Ruff with us there celebrating how that was going to help that family keep that business and keep that farm intact. We have many other examples like that. Southampton County recently an expansion of Belmont Peanuts, and they're actually bringing the facility to where they live, to their residents, and that's really exciting. And then in Rockingham County, you heard about Rockingham and what's going on there. We have a new cold storage facility that's going to be opening up that really provides a much needed access to cold storage right off of 81. So you'll be hearing more about that as that comes together. We also have a very thriving aquaculture business. Rappahannock Oyster, for example, they received an APHA grant in the past. They're doing great things. They're great land stewards. They're using innovative practices to farm oysters in the state. They have a thriving restaurant business. They've now opened a restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, in addition to the ones they have here in Virginia, and just recently opened one in LA. So whatever we can do to sort of showcase these great businesses and to be able to give them a little incentive money, working with local government, it can truly make a big difference. So we've been celebrating a lot in our secretariat. August was beer month. We moved into distilled spirits month in September. October was wine month. So we're not only drinking milk, we're drinking lots of different beverages and celebrating that. And I was just in Floyd County celebrating with Diane Flint, as mentioned. Got to drive by a beautiful farm that you're going to be hearing about shortly. And to be able to see what we've been able to do, innovating, working closely with Virginia Tech and others, cooperative extension, the research that's being conducted at our ag stations across the state, really truly makes a difference. And so just looking and thinking about last night as we were celebrating with Diane, she was growing 30 different heirloom apples on her farm. And she was able to do that because of the research that Virginia Tech had done and others, and being able to work hand in hand with them to be able to highlight those. The one thing that she talked about was the fact that when she had folks out to her farm, when they picked apples and they took a bite of a particular apple, it brought back memories for them. And I think that's what's really unique about the work that we do in agriculture, is that we all have memories, and often food brings those memories back. And so how do we make sure we preserve that important culture that's a big part of our culture here in Virginia? We now have over 300 wineries and cideries, so they're actually combined together. And we believe that that is sustainable in the state. The hard work of these talented winemakers thinking about new innovative approaches that they're using, ways that they're producing things, the ways that they're shipping, the way they're getting their product out to the market is really efficient and innovative and continuing to change. We're talking about innovation. When you look at the craft breweries that we have, you'll be hearing more about that. It's truly tremendous, just the type of beer that's available. Over 250 breweries in the state. Our market studies show we could have twice that. So more opportunities to continue to support the great farmers here in the state. And we have 80 distilled spirits, and so there are many of those not far from here that we can all take advantage of. So thinking about what's coming up in the next 2 weeks, we're celebrating cider, more than cider week or cider, it's not cider month. It's for 2 weeks you can get out and truly visit our cideries and participate and learn more about the apples and the great things that are happening through their businesses. As mentioned, exports is very important. I just returned from Cuba and South Korea, so if I'm a little out of it today, it's because I'm a little jet lagged from those travels. But that's because those trips are really important, that we maintain those relationships. We've had the opportunity to have a number of trips since I came on board. So I was sworn in with the governor. We took the governor and first lady to the UK this past year, to Italy and to Germany. And with those trips, again, we're able to recognize those companies that are already buying our products and open new avenues moving forward. So we'll keep you posted about how we're doing there. Every year we have an ag trade conference that's been very successful. Last year was our 10th year. We would encourage you to participate in that. Our next one's going to be March 5th, 2019. And we have a great lineup of speakers that are going to be joining us for that. And so as we think about the issues that we have that often get in the way of us being more successful, rural broadband is a big issue. I know it's on your mind and you've been doing a lot to address that in your communities. And so we are working closely with the governor, with the Tobacco Commission and others to look at how we can address those issues, how it affects farming, how it certainly affects technology and innovation, and we can talk about that more during the Q&A session. For forest and farmland retention, we have some great tools in place. How many of you participate in the Ag PDR program that's available? Right, there's not a whole lot of money in that program, but it really can make a difference in the communities across the state. We're looking at ways we can improve that program. We'd love your advice and thoughts on that, because there's definitely some things that we can make better. And so we're going to be reaching out to those counties that are participating in that and looking at how we can improve that moving forward. We have other programs like the Century Forest and Century Farm programs. Those allow us to recognize those families that have been able to keep the land in the family over 100 years. And we really do think it's important to be able to raise them up and to recognize them and look at what allowed them to keep that family, keep that land intact and pass it down generation after generation. We have a very successful program with the Department of Forestry called Generation Next, and we're looking at expanding that. We've been able to reach families across the state to make sure that they have access to attorneys, to financial planners, to really think about all the tools that are in the toolbox that allow them to pass that down from one generation to the next. And those conversations can be difficult. Thinking about how you split up the land among your siblings, many siblings that may not want to come back to the farm. And we're trying to do all that we can to make that as easy for folks as possible. So we're looking at expanding that program for forest land and farmland. And so you'll be hearing more about that in the coming year. We also work very closely with the Black Family Land Trust. Ebony Alexander is their director. If you haven't met her, she's a force of nature and she's fantastic to work with. We're looking at all we can do to make sure that we're addressing air property issues across the state, which can be very challenging. And we've been successful in Virginia, and certainly Susan Seward knows this, with our reforestation of timberlands program. We've had this in place since the early 70s, and the industry decided to tax themselves, and the state is actually matching that, and that allows us to provide financial incentives for landowners, and it allows us to make sure we're having raw materials for industry long into the future. We've been very successful on the pine side, but 80% of our forests are actually hardwood. And so we know that we need to have a similar program in place for hardwood. So we're putting in place, working with the Board of Forestry, a hardwood task force. We're looking at how we can think about how do you put those incentives in place for landowners, because it's much more expensive, it's more complicated to manage for hardwoods, but it's really important. And it's important if we're going to continue to supply the white oak for Speyside, Cooperage, and Southwest Virginia. And so I would like to, again, before wrapping up, talk a little more about an innovative project we have with Healthy Watersheds. We've been very successful with our Chesapeake Bay program, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to protect the great waters that we have here in the state. So we've been working hand in hand with our partners at the local government level, with the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, to look at innovative ways to incentivize keeping land intact. And so we're in the third phase of that, and we've been able to demonstrate how we can help local government save millions of dollars, offsetting TMDL requirements by retaining forest land and farmland. We're in the third phase of that. Essex County and Orange County are going to be two of our pilots, and we're going to look at, we actually have interest from the private sector in investing in that land. And so you're going to be hearing more about that, and maybe next year at the VAGO meeting we can actually present on the results of that. So just a few more things as I wrap up. As mentioned earlier, we truly are feeding the world. I think there are many opportunities for us to continue to maintain and ensure we have healthy, sustainable forests and farmland across the state. And I'm a big believer that we should step into that space, that we should be recognized for what we do provide for the world. We are the world's wood basket, if you will. In the South, we provide wood that the world depends on. We provide food the world depends on. And we have to continue to be innovative to be able to make that happen. We have to work hand in hand with local government to make that happen. But we need to be recognized for that, and we need to be investing at that at the national level the way we have in great infrastructure. So I could talk about that a lot more as we get into Q&A, but I think we really do need to step in that space and to recognize the important role that ag and forestry plays across the Commonwealth and what you're doing to put in place to make sure that stays that way. So I thank you for your efforts. I look forward to continuing to work with you as we advance agriculture and forestry in the state, and making sure that we have healthy people, healthy communities, healthy farms, and healthy forests. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Will you be able to punch the button? I have not really good with technology, so I have all of these pictures together of my farm, and unfortunately, it's not in a presentation. So we're going to have Ashley punch the buttons, and it's just a running picture background for what I'm going to say. So I'm Susan Sink. I hail from Montgomery County in Virginia. Anyone here from Montgomery County? Yay, good. And I am here today as a farmer from my family farm, Sinkland Farms. We are located 2 miles off of Interstate 81, about 10 minutes from Virginia Tech, about 10 minutes from Radford University, 20 to 30 minutes from Salem and Roanoke. So we're in that neck of the woods in Southwest Virginia, where the population begins to, I guess, go down. And it goes down, I think, as we get into deeper Southwest Virginia. I want to share my story with you this afternoon, and hopefully I will share not only my story, but how many farmers today are being creative and innovative to change the way they are farming. I come from, we originated as a dairy farm back in 1979. We sure are talking about dairies today, which is great because it's long needed. And so we've gone from producing milk to producing beer, along with many other things in agritourism. I like to say that Sinkland Farms was in the agritourism business even before that word was coined. Even as a dairy farm, we started back in 1979, and I want to sort of draw a picture in your mind of how we started. Right out of college, we'd only been out, my husband and I had only been out Virginia Tech and Radford University for myself, just about a year, and we were both from home farms in Franklin County. Anyone here from Franklin County? Great. So we knew that, first of all, we knew we were going to end up as a couple and get married, and then we knew that we really wanted to have a farm, which was back, the heritage of both of our families and their tradition. So we began looking for a farm, and we actually came across one by virtue of a recommendation from our extension agent. We love extension agents. Every farmer does, I think. But at any rate, our extension agent recommended we talk with Mr. Edlund Keith and his wife Edna. We began that conversation, and we actually ended up being financed by Mr. Keith to take over lock, stock, and barrel the dairy farm there on Route 8, right off the interstate. We bought the land, 125 acres. All of the buildings that were on the land. I heard of Holstein dairy cattle registered at the time, and we had a total of maybe 170 cattle when you're looking at dry cows and heifers and calves. We even inherited all the trash on the farm, the creosote in the barrels, and, the old equipment, the old rundown pieces of rusted equipment just laying around on the farm. But we were so happy. We had started our dream. On New Year's Eve in 1979, New Year's Eve, we were in the house, and my husband was to begin milking his very first milking at the change of New Year's Eve to New Year's Day. The Keith farm was on New Year's Eve, and it would be the Sink farm on New Year's Day. So we were in bed and fast asleep, and all of a sudden there is a knock on the door. Here it is, New Year's Eve. Someone's knocking on the door about 2 a.m. So we're scared to death. That's never a good thing when someone knocks on your door in the middle of the night. So we rushed to the front door, fling the door open, and there was a Montgomery County deputy at the front door. And we're just thinking, oh my goodness. goodness gracious, what in the world's going on? He looks at us and says, I don't know if you know, your milking herd is walking down Route 8. So that, my friends, was our introduction into the dairy business. The very first challenge on the very first moment of the name transition for this 125-acre farm. So we got out there, it was clear, was no snow on the ground or anything. We herded the animals in with the help of that deputy. And my husband just stayed down there and milked his milking maybe about an hour early that day. We come to find out Mr. Keith had forgotten, was so excited that this was his last milking that he forgot to lock the gate. So anyway, the dairy business, we were in the honeymoon period for probably 3 to 4 years, where everything was just hunky-dory. That was the time in which the dairy industry in the mid-80s began to tank because too much supply and not enough demand of fluid milk and other sources for milk products. We were milking 125 registered Holsteins, as I mentioned earlier, and then about that 3rd or 4th year in the business, we began to wonder what was happening because our bills were higher than what our income was. And all this time, I've always had an off-the-farm job, just so that you know, and I've provided for the family living and anything that we needed to do, food, clothing, paid a lot of the household bills and things like this, where my husband's income went back into investing in the farm and increasing what we were in business for. So at any rate, we began thinking about what else could we do. So the first thing usually a farmer thinks of is selling sweet corn. So we sold sweet corn by the side of the road. This was about 1984, 85, and several years after. We just fill up an old hay wagon with sweet corn every morning, put an honor box out on Route 8, and at the end of the day, most of the corn was gone. And lo and behold, there was some money in that box. And I had a job off the farm, and Henry was working the field, so we couldn't be there the whole time. At any rate, that helped us tremendously. Then we had, I think, our first drought in Southwest Virginia in maybe 1985, 86, and it was horrendous. We fed all of our animals from the farm with corn silage, hay. We did do some supplemental feed for increased milk production that we purchased. But at any rate, that drought really was a hard hit. And it seems that about every 4 to 5 years, at least in my neck of the woods, we have a horrible drought. Like this past year where we had too much rain. But at any rate, we began again talking to our extension agent, and they suggested several other things. So I opened a strawberry U-pick patch. We experimented with blueberries, thornless blackberries. We even planted some Christmas trees on our land. That was a bomb, horrible. The coldest winter ever. We planted Christmas trees. We were trying to sell them again on the side of the road, and everyone, I guess, wanted to barter chickens or eggs or anything but cash, and we needed the cash. So then years continued to go, and we continued to, figure out how to pay our bills. And then at some point in time, I think this was now in the early 90s, our extension agent again said, why don't you try planting pumpkins? We are known here in Southwest Virginia that the soil and the weather is conducive to growing pumpkins and winter squash and kale and broccoli and all of these wonderful winter vegetables. And we did. We started growing pumpkins and wholesale them to a number of little small markets in Southwest Virginia. Then I saw an advertisement in the paper of a family who was having a pumpkin festival. Never heard of a pumpkin festival before. This was like early 1990, 91. So I took my husband, I said, we're going to go see this. And we visited, this pumpkin festival happened to be in Craig County. Anybody here from Craig County? Good. And, thought, what in the world would I expect on that road? So we must have taken the worst back road to Craig County from Christiansburg, Virginia, and it was almost car sickness for me, going winding around in the hills and the valleys. We got there, and I didn't know what to expect. I was expecting to see maybe a parking lot full of pickup trucks. You know, I'm a farmer. We drove a pickup truck, but it wasn't. It was a parking lot full of all of these fancy vehicles, some that I didn't even know what they were. You know, these wonderful sedans and SUVs and all of these wonderful, fancy, expensive vehicles. And we got out of our car, parked, after we parked, and we were walking up, and we saw all of these families, mainly young families with children, running around with smiles on their faces. And this farm actually only had a wagon ride to the pumpkin patch. They had a few goats and a pen. And one of their big secrets was they had a local church making fried apple pies on the property. So people were standing in line over an hour for those fried apple pies, and I was one of them. And they were wonderful, but at any rate. So we went back home, and I told him, I said, you know, we could do this. We could do this. We're 2 miles from the interstate. We have the university towns close by. Why don't we try? So we actually called the owners of this farm, and we met with them within 10 days. And they were so helpful. They were wonderful. And they were very excited for us. A very young couple coming in with enthusiasm and energy. And this was a retiring family from farming, and they were hoping that someone else would continue their tradition, even though if it was a different family. So the very next year, we started our first pumpkin festival. We just went through our 27th season. So you guys do the math, I can't figure it out in my head. 27th year. And we've grown tremendously. We started out small. Of course, the hayride to the pumpkin patch to pick your own great pumpkin. We were one of the first farms in the state of Virginia to have a corn maze, and we don't do that maze company. We do it all ourselves with the help of Virginia Tech and civil engineering. In fact, the department head actually takes our design and puts it on the CAD key program and comes out and shoots the points, and we use a riding lawnmower to cut out our corn maze. So a few years ago, we started talking to a couple of other farm families in our neck of the woods, and we invited another farm to bring their ponies out to provide pony rides, yet another farm to bring horses, rescue mission horses, for horseback trail rides on our farm. Began to add music. We had 2 stages, 10 days, 20 shows were open every week for 5 weekends, last weekend in September and every weekend in October. We also began contacting all of the universities to have their a cappella groups come out, and you can keep a cappella groups and other entertainers come out, and you just keep going. You just keep hitting it. Good. And so in the end, there is so much going on in that farm that I can't even remember, honestly. We have arts and crafts vendors. We have people, we have face painters for children. One of my daughters runs a kettle corn stand. My other daughter manages hot food for sale there at the Pumpkin Festival. We have anything imaginable, I think, that you can think of going on. It's not a playground, I will have to say, where many farms have gone to. I would never put one of those bouncing pillows on my land, but I don't want to offend anyone. So, at any rate, I pride myself on having something for everyone at our festival. All ages, and in fact, our target market in the past has been young families with children, but more and more, you would not believe the number of college students that come. It's unbelievable, and seniors that come just for a day away from home on the farm. So anyway, our Pumpkin Festival is really the first thing that Sinkland Farms did in the agritourism arena. After that, shortly after that, I began hosting school field trips on the farm. Again, educational field trips. This last year, this past October, we served over 102, I know the exact numbers, 102 schools, even as far away as West Virginia, Franklin County. Some of these schools rode 90 minutes to get to our farm for an hour-and-a-half school field trip. It's unbelievable. And then the total number of students that were served was over 8,000 just in 1 month. So, Pumpkin Festival, school field trips, I forgot to say and should have, we dispersed the dairy in 2007 when my husband passed away. So I have had to completely transition a dairy farm to what it is today in the last 11 years. So then I mentioned the festival, school field trips. I began opening up Sinkland Farms as a wedding venue. We typically have from 30 to 32, 33 weddings per season on the farm. And then my latest venture is we've opened a brewery, a craft brewery. I grow barley on the farm as a cover crop for the pumpkins. And it is malting barley. We had been selling it to Asheville, North Carolina, to their brew industry, and about 2 years ago I got to thinking, well, why don't we just use it here? And so last November, it's been almost about a year, November 15th, just a couple of days from that, we began offering our own craft beer. We are growing in the craft beer business as we go very slowly. So I'm wanting to sort of experiment with that. I don't know if I'm a brewery or just a venue, quite frankly. It seems that because of the pretty venue, and I think that I hope you'll think that too, we draw so many different people from everywhere coming to visit our farm. And so at any rate, this career or this profession for me has been very, very rewarding. When my husband passed away, everyone was thinking that I was going to sell the farm and move to Florida or somewhere. And the first thing that came to my mind was, oh my gosh, no, I would never do that. This is, our legacy, this farm. This is the inheritance of my 3 children. And I am serving my community in many different ways. We hired a great number of young people, not only from the colleges, but from the high schools, to help us. We are known as an economic driver in Montgomery County. As our economic director talks with new companies coming in, they always mention Sinkland Farms as a wonderful family place to bring their families and their friends. Most of the businesses in my area down Route 8 say their best months of the year economically is the month of October. So, I'm really proud of everything that we do, and I'd love for each and every one of you guys to come visit us at some time.
Again, it's about redefining farming. I mean, it's what you have to do to survive. And it's much better that this lady is on her farm than to have rooftops on it, because it's not likely that other farmers are going to invest in that and to another farm. It's more likely a developer is going to come along from North Carolina and want to put lots of rooftops on it, because Montgomery County is a very growing area and it's very attractive for that kind of thing, much like our community. So you're to be applauded for your innovation and your courage. Goodness, amazing. I'm going to start with a couple questions, and I'm going to go on script, but I have one. There are some pretty significant issues among agri-producers in Virginia. And I know this because my daughter tells me these things. And one of the toughest issues to balance is how farmers perceive their production and how they want to use it. And probably the most controversial aspect of that among the farming community is ethanol and feed grain corn. And in some parts of the state, the corn producers really like the ethanol. And in another part of the state, they're not so fond of it because it drives grain prices up for feed grains that they use on their poultry and dairy operations and beef cattle operations. So my question is, Madam Secretary, how difficult is it to balance your job between those two competing groups and the arena of agriculture? Because it seems to me that would be very difficult.
Great question. Can you all hear me without getting back to the mic? I think that is our challenge. We have a very diverse state. So you go from the eastern shore all the way to extreme southwest Virginia. You think about how long it takes to get from one end of the state to the other, and the diversity of agriculture and forestry in that area, and then going north and south as well. We have a very strong private property rights value in the state, and so I think that we certainly allow markets to influence a lot, and also making sure that we're protecting private property rights at the same time that we're protecting the environment. Certainly market determines and drives quite a bit, and that can vary across the state as well. We have a lot of discussion within the forestry community around exports. So there can be differences of opinion there. So I think it's really important for us as policymakers, as local and state leaders to truly listen, to truly understand our constituents, to understand the resources that we have. And so at the county level, again, I'm really impressed as I look across the audience and also seeing those of you that raised your hands. You understand your community and getting to make sure you understand your district and the people in that and what their needs are, but understanding the whole county and then how that fits in across the state. And the state leaders, we have to balance all of that. And so how do we make sure that we're getting the very best advice? You all at the local level can really influence things as it relates to land use policies, ag and forestal districts, other things that are in place that at least help us retain forest land and farmland so that it can be there versus the rooftops, as you mentioned, and also looking at the cost of services, if you have more development and what that can be versus the cost of services that a farm may demand of local government. So I think that there are many pieces that we have to kind of take into play. We have to look at making sure as we make decisions with state resources and tax dollars that we're doing that wisely, and so that with the APHID program, for example, we try to make sure that we're being very thoughtful and that we're following up that those businesses and local government have 3 years to meet their criteria and certain agreements in their business plan and what they've set out to do, and that we evaluate and that we have accountability, if you will. As it relates to differences among the farmers, I've always been impressed, and I'm going to brag on Katie, who's no longer serving as the director of the Virginia Agribusiness Council. She moved on to Farm Credit. But I think the ag community has done a great job, despite those differences, to be able to work through that, to have one voice, and that really makes a difference when you're dealing with state legislators. They don't want to see the ag community or the forestry community come in divided. And so sometimes you have to close the door and you have to work through those difficult issues together so that you can come out and think about what's best for the ag community as a whole, or about what's best for the forestry community as a whole. And sometimes you just have to agree to disagree. And so it doesn't directly answer your question about those particular ones, but looking more broadly, I think within the beef industry, a lot of differences between the Cattle Association and cattlemen across the state of Virginia, and that's a tough one. So how do we create an environment where people feel safe, sharing their voice, that they're being heard, and that's a safe environment, that we sort of have that trust in place, and that respect for each other, and respecting our differences, and making sure that all voices have a seat at the table.
Well, we've experienced that in Rockingham County and different things like one of the areas that comes to mind is a very extensive court case we went through several years ago with gaming birds, gaming fowl, and there were producers that wanted to produce gaming birds for recreation and hunting and things like that. But in an area that has lots of intensive poultry, we were very, very aware of how the avian flu might come into play there. So our land use and our zoning requirements had to kind of redefine some things, and it was one of those things where you couldn't make both sides happy, so we had to weigh which side was more important for our overall community. So we decided to side with the poultry industry and against the gaming birds, and so people weren't some people were not very happy about it, but I think most people were, and it turned out to be the best decision. Susan, you transitioned your farm. It sounds like you remade your farm, you redefined it. Again, that's an issue that counties struggle with. I know that Ann knows what I'm talking about here. When we look at trying to keep people on the farm, we know that sometimes you have to reinvent yourself to stay there. And one of those things that seems to be problematic is the statewide building code and zonings and event centers and those sort of things, and compliance with the statewide building code, and how localities, through their zoning ordinance and regulations, can maintain the statewide building code, but yet at the same time have flexibility to allow you to have event centers that may not meet the statewide building code for fire flow and those kind of things. How difficult is that? How difficult was that for you to navigate in Montgomery County, or was it?
That's a very interesting question, a great question, because this is something that is a challenge today for me. I didn't even think about it when I started into this, because we've been doing pumpkin festivals for 26, now 27 years, with public going through our barn. But when I added the brewery, that sort of puts a new context around farming. And so then I actually was contacted by our county board of, what's it called?
Building official.
Yes, the building officials, the fire marshal, all these people. I had to go in and talk with them. And, it was very interesting because I had no idea how comprehensive something like this is, because it's not just making your building safe, and we want it safe. Every farmer doesn't want to have anything unsafe. Safety is first, because you can lose everything. If there's any incident that's large enough, you can lose everything. And so safety from the farmer standpoint is not an issue. We want it to be safe. But there is so many nuances. Yes, I'm happy to put on man-made doors inside of my barn doors. Yes, I'm happy not to have fire pits in the barn. I didn't know that, You saw the fire pit in the barn. No more do we have that. But the things compound. They lead to other things. And I do know the state of Virginia is looking at building code now, because I'm on that governor's task force with Martha Walker. So at any rate, there needs to be, I think, a medium and some concentration and thought with regard to really what is absolutely necessary. Right now, I have done a number of things to make my county happy. However, they were saying that this may affect my tax basis. Right now, I'm taxed ag forestorial. And if my tax basis changes, and I have to put in a turning lane, and I have to have my septic system checked, and I have to insulate my barn and put in a sprinkler system, and I have to make sure I've got the right bathroom set up, it will put me out of the agritourism business. So I'm not sure that, I think that farmers like me want to work with county officials to make sure that we can have safety first in the public interest, but we also want to make sure that our public officials understand, that some of this stuff is just out of the question for us to do. I don't want to change from the agricultural venue that I have. Yeah, I can tear that down and put it in an event center, but that's not what I want to do. I want to show people. I really want to be in agritourism, where the definition of agritourism, you bring people to your working farm and you share with them what you have, you educate them, and you entertain them. That's really the definition of agritourism.
And it's a very difficult position on both sides. You can't say that one side's right and the other's wrong. I mean, local government, as we know, we're obligated to uphold the Code of Virginia, and part of the Code of Virginia is the statewide building code, and we served on the fire board, and we probably had our footprint on that, some of those rules and regulations. It's a conflicting thing, and it's a difficult, I think, issue to address, and I think we're all hopeful that the General Assembly at some point will bring some clarity to the issue so we all know what the best rules by which to play, but it doesn't appear that's going to happen anytime in the near future, but hopefully soon. I only bring that up because I know Ann is struggling with some of that issue in Albemarle County. I know we are in Rockingham County as well. And I'm sure other counties are going through the same issue, and it's very complicated. And I think local government is very sensitive to the needs that you brought up, but at the same time, they feel some obligation to protect the general public as well, and it's a double-edged sword, because if we just ignore it and something does happen, we're just as liable as you are, because we permitted it. And so there's all of those factors, and it really is on the General Assembly to fix that. And we might go with ideas, but they have to fix it. Well, anyway, I've asked my 2 questions, and now I will open it up to the gentleman from Franklin County, where they make a special product for a long time. It's very clear, like that water right there, but it doesn't taste like that water, which I've experienced a number of times, and I really enjoy it. Thank you very much.
I've known Susan a long time. I knew her dad when he inspected my dairy farm. I don't know. But one of the things that Susan commented on that is a concern to me, she stated it, and we all know it. On a farm, if you do something, your whole farm is at risk. And what I mean is liability. They can come in and they can wipe you out. Now, people in here that may be government employed, how about your pension? If you did something really bad, is your pension secure? I think it is. Now, we don't have the same principles operating. And being on the Board of Supervisors in Franklin County, it came to me in a discussion one day, my farm is my wealth, it's my retirement.
That's right.
And it's being taxed every day. And I said, and he works for somebody else, and I said, your wealth is not being taxed every year. He said, oh, I'm going to pay for it when I get it. And I looked at him and I said, oh, are you telling me that Uncle Sam won't want the capital gains tax and the other taxes when I make the transition of selling this land to live with my retirement? And I get well, where'd this guy come from?
I know clapping.
Very good. Yes, ma'am. If you would stand, if I may ask you also to state your name and what county you're
My
in.
name is Barbara Bird, and we used to raise apples a long time ago, but we got out of it when the Chinese kind of drove us out.
And you're from?
Clark County. But
Clark
up in
County.
Winchester, we have a lot of apple growers that are diversifying, which you have to do to stay alive. And the Solenbergers and the Blaze family have gone ahead and put in cider presses. They're producing hard cider, as well as there's beer being brewed up there too. And people are looking to plant barley in the fields and hops. But you have to diversify. We didn't diversify, but we didn't sell our land. We are now renting it to a wonderful farmer who raises soybeans and corn, and a man who raises sod. But there are no houses there.
Yes, sir.
John Fant, Grayson County. Madam Secretary, could you talk a little bit about beginning farmer programs? You know, we've got an aging farmer population, but we really want to get the next generation into farming. And so what's the state doing to encourage young farmers, either from incentives or training programs or whatever, to get into agriculture?
Great question. And that is sort of our whole, the umbrella of farmland and forest land retention. We're putting, making sure that we're propping up programs that have been there, that are currently there, or have been there in the past, and then looking at new programs for the future. There's a program called Farm Link that allows us to connect young farmers with existing farmers to have mentoring programs. Sometimes they're farming families where the siblings don't want to come back to the farm or they're unable to pass it on to that next generation. But there are also folks that are coming back to the land, and that's really exciting to see too. They have a real interest in this. And I would like to applaud both Virginia Farm Bureau and the Virginia Agribusiness Council because they have young leadership programs, and those are very effective. We also have a great program at the state level that Virginia Tech's involved with, the Valor program. And so we're trying to really look at these ag leadership programs and make sure that we're listening to what those young farmers are saying, that we're trying to address some of those issues that are coming forward. Financing is a big part of it. I know just listening this past session, I had a chance to meet with a number of those young farmers and listening to them around credit issues. And so making sure that we have the farm credit program, having First Bank, having local lenders and other larger institutions that truly understand agriculture, the uncertainties associated with agriculture, and how you really need to be able to support those farmers through those difficult times. And so that's a big piece of it too, because it's very expensive for these younger farmers to get into it, especially if they're not inheriting a farm from their family. And so we are trying to take all of those pieces into account. I think having Jewel now as our VDAX commissioner, she has a strong background in extension, and she was at Virginia State University. And I'm really excited about what Jewel and Charles are working on internally at VDAX and how we're going to be able to move some of that forward. And if you have any ideas or thoughts, I'd love to give you my card. I'd love to hear from any of you as it relates to that, because it's one of our top priorities, and the governor's agreed that that's a priority we should be focusing on.
And the governor spoke this morning about workforce readiness, and I think a number of school divisions are totally bought in to the workforce readiness program, including areas in agriculture. I know in Rockingham County at our vocational center, it's not just about technology jobs, but it's also about farming and the technology on farms and things like that. So we have a very, I think, aggressive and interesting farm program through our vocational center that's run, comes from our students from our high schools, run by a former ag teacher, Eric Fitzgerald, and it's pretty innovative, and other counties are doing the same thing, and I think it's really good. Hands up.
Yeah, I'd like to just quickly add to that. The FFA programs, the 4-H programs, keeping those intact at the local level, it's important. FFA is starting to be on the climb again, and
yes.
So we brought the Secretary of Education in on those discussions. We also had the governor meet with FFA leaders early on in the session this year. So all that we can do at the local level to support those efforts is really important.
Okay, Ann, and then you, okay? Ann first.
Ann Malik, Albemarle County, very small beef and timber operation. And also, I wanted just a question and a plug for, the plug is for the Artisan Trail program in Virginia, which began about 6 or 7 years ago. And for a farm like Susan's, to be the site sponsor or one of the site sponsors on an Artisan Trail all around you is a way to bring people from far away using the VTC wonderful website for making programs. I am, as I said, a very small beef person who is on our Monticello Artisan Trail, merely for moral support, but really dozens of people have found me to come and buy a burger or a side at my garage through this printed map or then what's available on the line. And they love to do farm visits and that kind of thing. It also makes you that your three-dimensional program all over the state. And it's one of those win-win situations. It's just great for all those constituents. My question is, does the APHID program have a capability of helping someone who's transitioning a dairy to organic? Because we used to have 50 dairies in Albemarle when I was little. We now have 3. The one who is selling out all the time is the organic dairy. They cannot keep enough milk.
Yes, yes. And that's definitely something we should talk about and look at, because there are definitely ways that we can transitioning to a new approach. And I think, as mentioned earlier, as we set the stage for this panel discussion, we have to continue to innovate. We have to keep thinking about how we make sure we're diversifying our businesses and that we're holding them up and supporting them. And so we want to look at what we can do there. We're doing everything. We want to do everything we can for the dairy industry. It's tough.
Great.
Drink more milk, eat more ice cream. Almond milk may be good for some people, but I really like milk. Yes, sir.
Randy Slayton, Forestry. I've been in the burning and reforestation business for 38 years now. And with the increase in logging here in Virginia, I'm having a problem getting seedlings to replant the reforestation land. I have to go out of the state of Virginia to get trees, and the quality of the trees is not as good as Virginia. Is there any possibility of increasing the amount of trees, seedlings being raised in Virginia so that we can get the land planted, or either contracting the nursery out to increase the amount of seedlings? Is there any plans to help us out at all?
Yes, sir. So we've been looking at the nursery program for the last 3 to 5 years. We've been trying to be doing a better job as it relates to inventory, to knowing what we have and what the demand is. We want to make sure we're not having to plow seedlings under, and so that's something we always have to balance too, because those nurseries are totally self-sustaining. This past year, we've been growing about 33 million seedlings for loblolly, and then in our Augusta nursery, so that's in Sussex County, at our Augusta nursery, we have mostly hardwood and some white pine. And so this past year, we had a weather issue that caused us to lose some of our seed. So you may know that from talking to Harvey Darden, our local manager. And so that's been an issue for us. It also was an issue for the North Carolina nurseries. And so we're all a little bit strapped there, and we're having to rely on some other seedlings. We have top quality seedlings. I'm so proud of our seedling program in Virginia, and so we continue to improve that. Next year, hopefully it's going to be different. We're trying to put some things in place to address what happened this past year. And so we feel your pain, and I'm very sorry. I know Rob and Harvey are trying their best to work on that and to make sure you have easy access beyond the state, but we realize that the quality is not the same, and that impacts your clients.
Who is the new person running the nursery now?
So Justin Funk is still, so he recently left, and they just filled that position, and I have not met that individual now that I'm in my new position. I don't get to see those folks as often as I'd like, and I forget the individual, but I can, reassure you, Harvey Darden, who is the lands director over that individual's staying on top of this issue, and I'd be happy to get that contact information.
Any kind of help that you can give us, because when I have people call me to reforest their land, and I say, look, I don't have any Virginia trees, they're the best trees to use, they grow faster. I have to rely on North Carolina and South Carolina to put trees on their land, and they're not very happy when I tell them that. So, any help you can give us to get the Virginia trees, even if you do have to plow up 1 or 2 beds, that is no harm in that, because the amount of income that you make off the tree, it's no harm in plowing a couple of them. So.
And we used to have another nursery in New Kent, but we had it closed a number of years ago. We've talked about whether we should be reopening that, again, bringing that back, which would give us more capacity. So we're going to continue to look at that, because the demand is certainly there.
Any help you can give us, because we're in a hardship right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So sorry.
You had a question?
Yes, I'm Steve Beck from Shenandoah County, and I'm a small farmer, been a whole farmer my whole life, and I've had to make a whole lot of changes. We went from producing hogs about 20 years ago to direct marketing on the pork. 8 years ago, we took a big plunge, put it in the USDA process facility, thanks to BDOTS, the former Secretary Haymore, helped get the right people in place that did it. I was crazy at my age for doing it, but it's either that or get active. Like I say, we're so blessed, and so what I'm saying here is those small people have to take a commodity and put it into food form. And to have the opportunity, it's what's called small economic development. I've got about 8, 9 people employed between the farm, the process, and getting up and down the road and delivering. So we're very thankful. On another note, you made a comment toward FFA and the youth in the state. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Ag education is so important here in the Valley. I'm from Shenandoah County. Mr. Kyger said Rockingham is #1. We have 4 of the 5 largest sales accounts in the state of Virginia right there. So it's very, very important. And I just understood a few weeks ago, and it was kind of disheartening to hear that the ag education program at Virginia Tech is falling hard times. And the reason I say that is, I understand that there was 2 graduates last year, and there may be 4 this year. And a lot of people aren't aware of it, and I was shocked when I heard it. I talked to some other people, they did the same thing. One of the things that really hit me is they did away with their shop program. comment was, well, you get that online. When I was in high school, I learned to weld in my shop. I continue to weld. To me, that's unacceptable. Now, there used to be a ag teacher in the valley. He went to Clemson. They got a robust ag education program down there. They're taking students from Virginia and educating them, and they're coming back.
At Virginia tuition rate.
What's that?
At the Virginia State tuition
But
rate.
at least what I'm saying is they're getting educated. And to me, it's just not right. We've got to turn this thing around, and the seed is already planted. Hopefully some of us in the valley can go down and visit and do this. Because we got, let's say, 300 ag teachers in the state of Virginia, and only 2 coming out. That's not sustainable. And there's also, my last comment is there was one county who their teacher retired. They could not find a replacement teacher, so they did away with the ag program. So bottom line is, once it's gone away, we have to not bring it back.
Well, it goes along with the entire teacher shortage issue in Virginia. You know, ag is one of the suffering areas that you can identify, but teachers in general, and I think we all know that, is it's a diminishing profession because of the value or lack thereof we place into it, and it's a hard job. People don't realize teaching is hard, and unfortunately, for like the new teachers who come out of college, what happens? You know, they give them the toughest classes, the toughest kids, and the most duties to do the first 2-3 years they're in there. They're in there 3 years, and I say they don't want to do this. They're out of it. They're done. They're burned out. So we have to rethink a lot of things. Over here, and then back to you, Dennis.
Randy Keaton, Alway County Administrator. I also grew up on a century farm down in North Carolina, so I've been on both sides. Could you talk a little bit about we're starting to see a lot of prevalence of solar farms coming in, and there's controversy with that about they're taking productive farmland, but then on the other side, if the farmer needs to do that, you know, I have sympathy for that as well. So can you talk about that?
It's a big issue in our county too good.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And, Susan Seward ducked out just in time. I understand she was the moderator of the panel you had earlier today. It's a tough one because we certainly are promoting renewable energy. Again, the private property rights issue comes into play, knowing that you want to also make sure you're protecting water quality at the local level. You're dealing with local ordinances you have, as well as requirements in the Chesapeake Bay Agreement if you're within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And it is conversion of land at the local level. So how do we, it's a tough one. How do we wrestle with making sure that we know where the most important farmland, forest land is in the state? How do we make sure we have many tools in that toolbox that landowners can assess to be able to keep that land in farmland or forest land if they choose? Again, you know, if somebody comes in and offers a farmer a lot of money to put in a solar farm, you know, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made at the local level, at the family level. And so it's a tough one to really say how we're going to best move forward with that in the state is something that we're trying to talk about. We put the conservation cabinet in place. This is something that is important to the governor. And so we are doing all that we can at the cabinet level to have a lot of conversations about this. So myself working with the Secretary of Natural Resources, looking at, you know, how does this impact the land at the local level? How does this impact important land that we're trying to conserve? And can I say that in a working landscape manner? And then how do we make sure we're promoting renewables? And what we have agreements on with utility companies and what we want to see happen in the state, along with the Secretary of Commerce and Trade and the Secretary of Transportation. All of us trying to come together and work through these issues together. So I don't have a good answer for that, and I wish I had said it and had a chance to be part of your panel this morning, because it sounded like interesting discussion. And then the size. I think size, you know, certainly whether we're talking about smaller acreage, 250 or less, or we're talking about something much larger and the impact of that and how we address that. And it's very difficult, I know, for you all as local leaders.
Time for one more question, I promise, because we almost need to wrap up. Dennis, you had your hand.
I just have a real quick question.
Real quick, this is the last question.
I used to be a dairy farmer, and I'm beef and crops and that type of thing now. But how many dairy farms have gone out of business in Virginia in the last 5 years? Do you have any idea?
Way too many. We just did a dairy study. I'd be happy to share that with you, and I don't have those figures on.
I'll give you my card.
Yes,
I'm real concerned. I mean, that they are struggling big time.
Struggling, and then what's projected to go out of
Yes,
business
ma'am.
next
So,
year is not,
It
it's
just,
not pretty.
this is a hard question in my heart. I'm real concerned about that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would ask everybody, please, if you would be so kind to fill out the green form evaluation. At the end, let's give them an applause. Thank you very much.